You woke up early, you bought the absolute best bait, you found the perfect secret spot on the lake, and yet the fish are completely ignoring you. What if I told you the exact reason you are not catching fish right now is sitting right there in your truck's cup holder? That is right. Today, we are exposing a brutal truth that goes against absolutely everything your grandfather ever taught you about fishing. Does the smell of your morning coffee on your bare hands actually repel fish? You might think a little spilled coffee on your fingers is completely harmless, but I promise you, by the end of this video, you will realize you have been accidentally sabotaging your own fishing success for years. We are going to dive deep into the invisible chemical mistake that is costing you massive catches every single weekend. If you honestly think fish do not care about the smell of your morning brew, I dare you to try and defend that opinion in the comments below. Stick around and listen closely, because this unexpected discovery is going to completely change the way you prepare for every single fishing trip from now on. Fishing is a sport built heavily on deep traditions and stubborn habits. For generations, anglers all over the world have followed the exact same early morning ritual. You roll out of bed in the pitch dark, you brew a fresh pot of the strongest, darkest coffee you can find, you fill up a massive metal thermos, and you hit the road. It is practically a religion for us. We do it because our fathers did it, and their fathers did it long before them. We strongly associate the warm smell of fresh roasted beans with crisp, cool mornings on the water. Because of this deep-rooted, comforting tradition, most fishermen never stop to actually question if this specific habit is hurting their chances of getting a bite. We spend hundreds and sometimes thousands of dollars on highly sensitive rods, expensive reels, and incredibly realistic lures, obsessing over the perfect visual presentation. Yet we completely ignore the invisible chemical trail we are transferring directly onto our expensive gear with our own bare hands. Understanding exactly how scent works underwater is the absolute dividing line between amateur anglers who rely entirely on pure luck and seasoned professionals who consistently pull absolute monsters out of highly pressured public waters. Picture this exact scenario. It is 5 o'clock in the morning. The air outside is incredibly crisp and bitterly cold. You are driving down a pitch-dark, empty highway, heading straight for your absolute favorite local lake. In your right hand is a giant, insulated travel mug filled to the brim with dark, steaming hot, roasted coffee. It is the essential fuel that gets every single dedicated fisherman going before the sun comes up. You take a long sip, and maybe a little bit of that liquid drips onto your bare fingers. You casually wipe it off on your steering wheel, or maybe you rub it onto your heavy fishing jacket. No big deal, right? You finally pull up to the lonely boat ramp. The surface of the water is perfectly still, looking exactly like a sheet of smooth glass. You grab your rods, you grab your heavy tackle box, and you start setting up your gear in the low light. Your hands are completely covered in invisible, sticky coffee oils from holding that warm mug, from twisting open the thermos lid, and from wiping away those tiny spills. You confidently reach into your tackle box, grab a fresh, salty, soft plastic worm, and thread it perfectly onto your sharp hook. You do not smell anything strange, so you think you are completely good to go. But right underneath the calm surface of the water, a completely different and tragic story is about to unfold. You just unknowingly rigged your favorite bait with a glaring chemical warning sign. Let us talk about the exact moment you tie your very first fishing knot of the day. You're standing on the damp bank, and the morning sun is barely peeking over the tall pine trees. You pull the transparent fishing line tight, and maybe you even bite the tag end off with your teeth. Your bare fingers are vigorously rubbing all over that smooth fluorocarbon leader and the shiny metal eye of the hook. Every single twist, every single tight loop presses the invisible oils from your human skin right into the core of the tackle. Coffee beans are absolutely packed with strong, pungent essential oils. When those beans are roasted and brewed into a drink, those specific oils become incredibly sticky and dense. They cling tightly to the microscopic ridges of your fingerprints. Even if your hands feel completely dry to the touch, the bitter scent profile is permanently locked into your skin. Now, you take your rod and cast your line far out into the perfect shadowy strike zone. The heavy lure hits the water with a soft, quiet splash and immediately starts to sink toward the bottom. As it drops down through the dark water column, it leaves a long microscopic scent trail behind it. To your human eyes, it looks exactly like a juicy, injured baitfish trying to escape. But to the wild fish living in that liquid environment, It smells like a weird, bitter, burnt chemical that absolutely does not belong in their natural home. To truly understand why this tiny detail matters so much, we have to deeply examine the biology of the fish you are trying to catch. A lot of old-school fishermen stubbornly believe that fish only hunt with their eyes and the vibrations picked up by their lateral lines. They wrongly assume that if the lure looks perfectly realistic and moves exactly right, the fish will automatically eat it. That is a massive, costly misconception. Fish possess an incredibly advanced and highly sensitive olfactory system. They have paired nostrils, scientifically called nares, located right on the front of their snouts. The surrounding water flows directly into the front hole, washes completely over a highly folded sensory tissue, and flows continuously out the back hole. This biological detection system is always actively working. It literally never turns off. Certain game species can detect a foreign scent in the water at concentrations of just a few parts per billion. To put that massive scale into perspective, that is exactly like dropping one single tiny drop of liquid chemical into a massive Olympic-sized swimming pool and being able to instantly taste it. When your coffee-tainted lure suddenly enters their quiet living room, it screams that something is horribly unnatural. They do not just see your brightly colored bait, they smell its bitter chemical shadow long before it ever gets close to their face. You have probably heard many people constantly compare a trained dog's nose to a regular human's nose. Well, the truth is that many predatory game fish put the absolute best hunting dogs to shame when it comes to smelling minute details in a dense liquid environment. Think intensely about a big largemouth bass sitting quietly in muddy, stained water. The visual clarity is less than 3 inches. How in the world does that bass find a tiny crawdad hiding completely out of sight under a dark rock? It uses low-frequency sound and a highly tuned sense of smell. It literally smells the specific amino acids and natural proteins slowly radiating off that hidden prey. Now, imagine introducing your dark roast morning brew right into that delicate equation. You casually cast a heavy jig right to the base of a submerged, rotting stump. The base feels the sudden vibration and aggressively turns to strike. It moves in fast for the ultimate kill. But right as it opens its massive mouth to inhale the falling jig, it gets hit instantly with an overwhelming, suffocating blast of unnatural coffee oils. The base slams violently on the brakes. Instead of confidently committing to the heavy bite, it either lightly bumps the bait with its closed nose or just turns quickly around and swims right back into the dark shadows. You might feel a tiny, weird tap on your rod tip. Let us completely break down exactly what chemical properties make coffee such a strong, effective repellent for all forms of aquatic life. Coffee is, at its core, a terrestrial plant. More specifically, the heavy caffeine naturally hidden inside the raw coffee bean is not put there by nature to simply help you wake up early. Out in wild nature, caffeine serves as a highly potent natural defense mechanism. It is literally a biological pesticide that the growing coffee plant continuously produces to rapidly paralyze and kill harmful insects that try to eat its leaves. It is inherently bitter, highly acidic, and completely toxic to small living creatures. When you casually transfer this powerful natural defense chemical directly onto your delicate fishing line, you are literally applying a harsh bug repellent to your expensive bait. Wild fish have naturally evolved over millions of long years to immediately avoid bitter, toxic, plant-based chemicals because consuming them usually means sickness or death. When a heavy walleye or a smart brown trout clearly senses that specific sharp bitterness radiating strongly from your soft plastic worm, their small brain immediately receives a flashing danger signal. It does not smell like a tasty, helpless meal. It smells exactly like a dangerous, toxic threat. We love the smell of a fresh, dark roast, but to a fish, it is a glaring red flag. Right now, I know exactly what some of you older guys are strongly thinking. You are fondly remembering your grandfather. You are picturing how he proudly used to sit in his small aluminum boat, smoking a cheap, smelly cigar, drinking thick black coffee out of a scratched green metal thermos, and hauling in absolute monster fish all day long. This is the ultimate classic defensive argument. You might even be angrily typing it out in the comments section right now. But let us finally break down and destroy that legendary grandfather myth. Several decades ago, our local waters were completely different environments. The wild fish populations were massive, and the daily fishing pressure was practically non-existent compared to today. Fish were constantly competing heavily against each other for very limited natural food sources. When wild fish are aggressively competing in large numbers, they become incredibly reckless. They will quickly bite almost anything thrown at them, because if they hesitate for even 1 second, the hungry fish sitting right next to them will instantly steal the meal. Fast forward to today's reality. Our local community lakes and public rivers are relentlessly pounded by hundreds of smart anglers every single week. Catch and release practices mean the exact same individual fish are being hooked and caught multiple times. These modern fish are highly educated and incredibly cautious. Let us take a very close look at a highly common real-life scenario involving live bait. You make a quick stop at the local bait shop right around 6 in the morning. You happily purchase a couple dozen lively minnows or a fresh, cool box of thick night crawlers. You are casually holding your warm coffee cup in your left hand and paying the tired cashier with your right hand. You finally get out to the misty water. Your hands are completely coated in an invisible layer of harsh caffeine and roasted bean oils. You confidently reach barehanded into the small plastic bucket to grab a squirming minnow. The exact moment your contaminated skin touches that small, fragile baitfish, its internal stress levels immediately skyrocket. Fish naturally secrete a specific stress hormone known as cortisol, and they also instantly release powerful chemical alarm signals directly into the water whenever they are terrified or physically injured. By aggressively handling that delicate minnow with unnatural, bitter-smelling hands, you are literally terrifying the bait. The small minnow instantly absorbs your foreign scent right into its slimy coating. When you finally cast it out into the deep water, it does not act normally. It frantically puts off a screaming chemical distress signal, heavily mixed with a confusing coffee odor. The big predators swim over to investigate the struggle, but they just turn away. There is a massive, game-changing difference between a confident, aggressive bite and a highly hesitant, last-second rejection. This is something that professional tournament anglers absolutely understand perfectly. Imagine for a second you are slowly dragging a heavy, weedless football jig across a rocky, uneven bottom. You clearly feel the hard rocks, you feel the soft mud, and suddenly you feel a very solid, heavy thump. A big, aggressive bass has rapidly flared its gills and violently sucked the heavy bait in. If that specific jig smells completely like a natural muddy crawdad, the bass will confidently hold it deep in its mouth for several long seconds, happily chewing on it, actively trying to crush the hard shell. This natural reaction gives you plenty of glorious time to wind your line down tight and set the heavy hook with maximum pulling power. But if that exact same jig is heavily covered in the bitter oils from your morning espresso shot, the physical reaction is entirely different. The bass sucks it in, immediately tastes the bitter, unnatural chemicals on its tongue, and frantically flares its gills in reverse to aggressively spit it right out. This entire panicked process happens in significantly less than half a single second. You briefly feel a sharp tap on your bent rod. You rear completely back to violently set the hook, but you just rip it through totally empty water. Let us quickly talk specifically about modern artificial lures and highly popular soft plastics. Modern soft plastic baits are truly incredible pieces of engineering. They are heavily injected with heavy salt. They are incredibly soft to the touch, and they have tiny, molded ridges that aggressively move water. But the soft chemical material itself is extremely porous by design. It physically acts exactly like a dry kitchen sponge. When you reach down and grab a fresh, oily green pumpkin worm straight out of the plastic bag with your bare hands, that spongy material instantly absorbs absolutely whatever residue is currently sitting on your human skin. If you just casually wiped your mouth right after a hot sip of coffee, or you firmly held a hot paper cup from a local drive-through window, the soft plastic aggressively pulls those bitter oils right into its deep pores. Some stubborn guys will desperately try to fix this horrible mistake by soaking the bait heavily with strong garlic scent or a commercial sticky fish attractant. But here is the major biological problem. You are not actually erasing or removing the bitter coffee smell. You are just confusingly masking it. To a smart fish with a highly advanced sensory system, it does not just smell like fresh garlic. It smells exactly like strong garlic aggressively mixed with burnt, toxic plant matter. Picture this incredibly frustrating classic situation. You and a really good buddy are out quietly floating on the boat together. You are both casting toward the exact same submerged rock pile. You are both using the exact same expensive rod, the exact same clear fishing line, and the exact same brand of diving lure. You are even perfectly matching the exact same shiny paint color. Your buddy is happily catching a heavy fish on almost every single cast. He is loudly laughing, having a truly great time, and rapidly filling the bubbling live well. You, on the other hand, absolutely cannot buy a single bite to save your own life. You keep nervously checking your sharp lure. You keep quietly asking him exactly how fast he is reeling his handle. You desperately try to perfectly mimic his exact sweeping movements. Still, you get absolutely nothing. You slowly start to get incredibly frustrated. You strongly believe it is just terrible, unexplainable bad luck. But let us quickly rewind to the long drive to the local lake. Your buddy was quietly drinking plain bottled water. You were aggressively downing a massive hot cup of strong dark roast coffee. You both independently tied your own tight knots. You both hooked your own soft baits. The only real difference between his successful presentation and your totally dead presentation is the invisible layer of bitter scent completely painted all over your tackle. Let us dive much deeper into the actual science and chemistry of how scent physically behaves in the water column. We usually tend to incorrectly think of smells exactly the way they rapidly travel through the dry air. You walk quickly past a warm bakery, you immediately smell fresh bread. You walk past a busy coffee shop, you instantly smell roasting beans. But deep under the surface of a cold lake or a moving river, a smell is actually a distinct physical chemical trail slowly dissolving in a dense liquid medium. Heavy oils, specifically, behave very uniquely when fully submerged underwater. They absolutely do not just wash away instantly like dirt. They aggressively cling tightly to hard, smooth surfaces. They stick firmly to the shiny metal of your sharp hooks. They stick strongly to the hard plastic shell of your expensive crankbaits. They physically form a microscopic sticky film. As you slowly drag your vibrating lure through the dark water, this oily film slowly breaks down, leaving a very distinct, lingering chemical ribbon floating right behind it. This invisible ribbon heavily hangs in the dense water long after your fast bait has safely passed by. A cruising, hungry predator crosses that exact invisible ribbon. Instead of turning sharply to angrily track down a dying baitfish, its small brain clearly registers the confusing chemical signature of caffeine. Let us casually talk about the incredibly famous thermos spill. We have all absolutely done it at least once. You are sitting quietly on the damp bank, the bright sun is just coming up, and you happily pour yourself a fresh, steaming cup. A little bit of hot liquid aggressively spills right onto your freezing fingers. What is the very first instinctive thing you automatically do? You aggressively wipe your wet hands firmly on the side of your heavy denim jeans. You rub your rough hands together quickly. Maybe you even grab a dry paper towel and vigorously dry them off. You closely look at your bare hands. They look completely clean. They feel completely dry to the touch. So you go right back to happily digging aggressively through your messy tackle box. This is a monumentally huge mistake. Wiping your stained hands on your thick pants does absolutely nothing to actually remove the potent essential oils of the roasted coffee. All you successfully did was perfectly spread the sticky oils evenly across your entire skin surface. The natural heat radiating from your warm body actually keeps those bitter oils totally active and slowly evaporating. Your bare fingers are now a permanent mobile scent factory for the rest of the entire morning. Every single brass swivel you barely touch gets contaminated. So, what exactly happens when a moderately smart angler finally realizes their bare hands strongly smell like stale coffee? They desperately try to wash it completely off. They quickly grab a plastic bottle of clear hand sanitizer right out of the messy glove box. Or they angrily use some heavy-duty, strongly scented soap from the disgusting boat ramp bathroom. Or they aggressively spray chemical aerosol sunscreen directly onto their hands to simply cover the smell up. This common reaction takes a moderately bad situation and instantly turns it into an absolute unmitigated disaster. Cheap hand sanitizer is heavily loaded with incredibly harsh alcohols and cheap artificial perfumes. Scented bathroom soap is completely full of strange chemical fragrances. Aerosol sunscreen is basically a highly toxic slick of heavy metal particles and chemical blockers. When you desperately apply these unnatural things directly to your bare hands to get rid of the stale coffee smell, you are forcefully introducing chemicals that are 10 times more unnatural and highly offensive to wild fish. A smart fish might casually avoid caffeine because it is slightly bitter, but it will literally sprint frantically away in sheer terror from the overwhelming smell of artificial cherry blossom hand sanitizer or cheap coconut spray sunscreen. Imagine you are quietly standing knee-deep in a crystal-clear, freezing mountain stream. You are patiently targeting wild brown trout or beautiful rainbow trout. These specific fish literally live in some of the cleanest, most totally pristine environments on the entire planet. Their flowing water is incredibly pure. Their natural diet strictly consists of tiny, highly delicate insects and very small, completely natural bait fish. Because the cold water is constantly moving, they naturally rely heavily on the invisible scent trail washing rapidly down to them directly from upstream. You step quietly into the icy water, taking a quick sip from your metal travel mug. You carefully tie on a tiny, incredibly delicate nymph pattern. Your massive fingers, completely covered in your morning brew, rub aggressively all over the soft feathers and the incredibly fine, clear tippet material. You smoothly cast far upstream. As that tiny artificial fly drifts naturally down toward a patiently waiting trout, the cold water rapidly washes over it. A sudden plume of highly unnatural coffee scent travels quickly downstream, directly hitting the feeding fish long before the tiny fly ever arrives. In a pristine, untouched mountain stream, a dark roast coffee smell is as totally alien as a flying spaceship. Let us quickly shift gears entirely and closely talk about base fishing, specifically focusing on reaction strikes versus natural feeding strikes. A lot of stubborn anglers will loudly argue that when you are rapidly fishing fast-moving baits, like heavy spinnerbaits or deep-diving crankbaits, invisible scent does not matter at all. They loudly say the angry bass strikes out of pure, violent aggression before it even has the time to actually smell the passing bait. This is really only partially true. Yes, a violent reaction strike absolutely happens incredibly fast, but realistically, how many times have you had a massive bass slowly follow your moving crankbait all the way to the shiny side of the aluminum boat, only to lazily turn away at the very last possible second? We commonly call those frustrating fish followers. Why exactly did that huge fish curiously follow the bait for over 20 feet, but flatly refuse to actually open its massive mouth? Because as it got incredibly closer, it fully entered the invisible scent cloud, strongly trailing right behind the moving lure. The bright visual trigger absolutely made it violently chase. The heavy vibration in the water perfectly made it actively hunt. But the absolute final confirmation just before actually eating relies heavily on smell and taste. Now, if you are a dedicated catfish angler or you actively target bottom-feeding species, this specific coffee mistake is an absolute, undeniable deal-breaker. Big catfish possess long barbels, or sensitive whiskers, that are completely loaded with thousands of tiny taste buds and highly tuned scent receptors. They can literally taste a tiny piece of decaying food buried deep in the thick mud from several yards away. Their entire evolutionary hunting strategy is heavily based on patiently following a strong scent trail through totally dark, extremely murky river water. You happily spend good, hard-earned money on high-quality, incredibly foul-smelling stink bait, fresh cut bait, or bloody, fresh chicken liver. You desperately want that heavy bait to steadily put out a massive, flowing cloud of natural blood and strong natural proteins. But if you carelessly prepare that exact bait with bare hands, completely covered in your morning caffeine fix, you are totally destroying the natural scent profile. The incredibly bitter oils from the roasted coffee heavily mix with the dripping blood and natural oils of the raw bait. When a big, hungry flathead or a massive blue catfish actively picks up that flowing trail, they slowly follow it directly to the source. They gently bump the sitting bait with their sensitive whiskers. They taste bitter chemicals. A really big, totally valid question many people constantly ask is exactly how long this specific smell actually lasts permanently on human skin. You might honestly think that after a single hour standing outside in the fresh blowing air, the smell just naturally blows completely away. That is an entirely incorrect, highly dangerous assumption. Human skin naturally and continuously produces its own specific natural oils and salty sweat. When you carelessly handle a hot cup of black coffee, the heavy oils from the roasted bean rapidly transfer directly to your warm skin and aggressively mix with your own natural bodily oils. They securely form a tightly bonded layer right on your outer epidermis. If you naturally sweat even a little bit under the hot sun, your open pores firmly push more internal moisture completely out, violently pushing the trapped coffee scent right back to the top surface over and over again. Laboratory studies on scent retention clearly show that strong essential plant oils can remain highly active on human skin for up to 8 long hours if not properly washed with a neutralizing agent. That explicitly means the warm cup of coffee you happily drank at 5 in the early morning is still actively and strongly contaminating every single piece of tackle. So, how exactly do we properly fix this incredibly frustrating problem? Are you honestly supposed to just completely give up your precious morning brew entirely forever? Absolutely not. Recreational fishing is always supposed to be highly enjoyable, and for most of us out there, that warm morning cup is an absolutely non-negotiable part of the whole outdoor experience. The ultimate secret here is definitely not quitting coffee. The real secret is strictly practicing total isolation and using proper natural cleaning methods. First, you have to completely change exactly how you physically handle your plastic cup. Stop tightly wrapping your entire bare hand securely around the dripping lid where the sticky spills always happen. Stop carelessly wiping your wet mouth with the hairy back of your dominant hand. When you completely finish drinking, you absolutely need to neutralize your skin before you ever touch a single piece of expensive fishing gear. Do not use chemical pump soaps. Do not use stinging alcohol sanitizers. The absolute best way to thoroughly clean your hands right on the muddy bank is to simply use the natural environment. Reach straight down into the cold lake or the flowing river. Grab a thick handful of soft mud, wet sand, or wet green grass. Another truly fantastic, highly effective solution is purposely creating a solid physical barrier strictly between your daily morning habit and your final underwater presentation. Professional fishing guides and highly competitive tournament anglers have been quietly using this exact trick for many long years. Simply buy a cheap disposable box of tight-fitting, completely scentless nitrile gloves. Keep them permanently stashed right in your hot truck or securely tucked in your messy tackle bag. When you finally get down to the dark water, stretch a tight glove completely over your dominant hand. Firmly use that clean gloved hand to properly tie your complex knots, to carefully hook your slippery soft plastics, and to perfectly rig your squirming live bait. Your other bare hand, the exact one that tightly held the leaking coffee thermos, never actually touches the truly critical pieces of terminal gear. The clear line stays incredibly pure. The sharp hook stays incredibly pure. The natural bait remains completely natural. Once absolutely everything is properly tied on and completely ready to vigorously cast, you can simply peel the thin glove completely off and fish completely normally. It totally seems like a crazy, annoying extra step to an amateur, but it saves your catch rate. Here is the absolute ultimate, undeniable challenge strictly for you. I seriously want you to bravely run a totally strict experiment on your next 3 consecutive fishing trips. Change absolutely nothing else about your heavy gear, your favorite secret spots, or your expensive, colorful lures. The only single thing I truly want you to actively change is your total hand hygiene. Happily drink your warm morning coffee on the long drive, but directly before you step out of your parked truck, thoroughly wash your bare hands with a completely scent-free, totally natural fisherman's soap. Or walk straight down to the exact water's edge and aggressively scrub your hands with local river mud and rough gravel. Do not ever let a single tiny drop of bitter caffeine touch your plastic lures, your clear line, or your natural bait. Fish with totally neutralized, perfectly clean hands for 1 entire consecutive week. Closely watch exactly how the wild fish strongly react. Specifically notice exactly how many more of those very light, incredibly subtle taps rapidly turn into incredibly solid, violently aggressive bites. When you steadily start catching noticeably more heavy fish using the exact same old techniques you always faithfully use, you will fully understand. Let us fully tie all of this crucial information perfectly together. The absolute biggest takeaway here today is absolutely not that you have to miserably suffer through a freezing morning completely without coffee. The real shocking twist is simply realizing just how incredibly sensitive a wild fish's natural underwater environment truly is. You are literally stepping right into their quiet living room. One microscopic, invisible drop of highly bitter caffeine oil, totally trapped on a soft plastic worm, is completely all it really takes to instantly trigger millions of long years of natural survival instincts and completely turn a massive trophy catch into a fading ghost. By simply understanding chemical scent transfer, thoroughly scrubbing your bare hands with natural local mud, or smartly using a cheap disposable glove to perfectly rig your baits, you completely and entirely remove the totally invisible, glaring warning signs you constantly use to cast right into the clear water. This one incredibly tiny, seemingly insignificant shift in your early morning routine will absolutely drastically multiply your overall strike rate. Thank you so much for patiently watching and happily hanging out with me today. If this totally blew your mind or completely changed your tired perspective, vigorously hit that red subscribe button right now. Leave a massive like directly on the video, and I genuinely want to eagerly hear from you right down in the comments below. What is the absolute craziest, weirdest thing you have ever accidentally spilled directly onto your bait? And did you amazingly still manage to catch absolutely anything? Let us angrily debate it right down below, and I will happily see you out on the water.